My sermon title for today is Homo Sapiens. More on that in a minute, but I can begin by saying, good morning, fellow Homo Sapiens. That's all I see in the sanctuary. Yes, that's all I see in the sanctuary this morning. The bats that have often called our church home probably won't be out until after sunset. But we'd like to, Ann and I, especially greet and give hearty thanks to all those who have welcomed us so warmly. During our nearly 3-week stay here in the North Country. From your minister, James, who invited us to be a part of the pulpit supply for a sabbatical, to Carol Zimmerman, who graciously let us stay in her home, and to all the many dedicated, caring, extremely competent, and now deeply experienced crew who together helped Ann and me put on these worship services. Kathy and Robin and John and Maggie and the young technicians like Elias, and of course the many musicians, Betsy, Mary, Paul, and Jill, among others. You made it possible. But all of these folks are Homo sapiens, except for the COVID-19, of course, which just offered us incredible challenges. Do we deserve the title wise humans? Or perhaps kind, caring, compassionate humans, whatever those Latin terms might be. But what about the now common designation Homo sapiens? Do we deserve it? Let's remind ourselves of a few recent facts. There are many more you could cite, I could say. But as of at least March 1st of this year, nearly 60 million American adults, about 1/4 of the population, are unvaccinated against COVID-19. In Hong Kong, only about 30% of the elderly are vaccinated because of complacency after early success in containing the disease and because of a deep-seated mistrust of government. But they are now paying for it with a great surge of deaths from the latest wave of the virus finally reaching them. Would wise words from anyone convince today's vaccine naysayers to change their minds? I doubt it. That's one reason I doubt Homo sapiens is the best name for our species. Whose idea was this nomenclature anyway? Well, I had to look this up. Correct me if you know that I'm wrong, but I think it was the great Swedish botanist Carl Linnaeus, who in 1758 was in the middle of giving every living thing a binomial name, genus plus species. Didn't somebody else already give them names? Well, I've heard of that somewhere. But to place it squarely within a great taxonomy being created by the new development of science. The Homo part, as Shakespeare pointed out, was a common name to all men and women. It's the sapiens part that gives me pause, bothers me. How about instead Homo, kind, caring, and compassionate? Even in Latin, that wouldn't get too many votes in a widespread poll of all people not living under rocks the last 5 months. Maybe we should come up with a new name. Think about it and share that amongst yourselves in breakout rooms or during social hour. John Montan has already shared one with me, but I'll let him tell you. But there was some reason why Linnaeus chose sapiens to describe us. In a recent book titled Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, the source or impetus for much of my sermon today. The historian, not a scientist, but an historian, Yuval Harari, sums up the paleontologist views of how our species came to be differentiated from other animals. Briefly, about 6 million years ago, evolution brought forth the last common grandmother of humans and chimpanzees. She had twin daughters, one of whom was the matriarch of all chimpanzees, and the other was the mother ancestor of humans. From about 2.5 million years ago, there was the evolution of the genus Homo in Africa, marked by the first evidence of stone tools. There soon followed the spread of humans from Africa into Eurasia and the evolution of several different human species. We weren't it, that is, we Homo sapiens. The Neanderthal, Erectus, Rudolfensis, and several others, all with bigger brains than most animals. In East Africa, the species Homo sapiens kept evolving, but remaining like other human species, a rather unremarkable creature in the natural environment. Then about, excuse me. We could evolve some more. Then about 70,000 years ago, a truly remarkable thing did happen to make Homo sapiens stand out from any other human species and eventually from all other life forms on Earth. Harari calls this the cognitive revolution. Well, we'll see what he says. It sounds pretty deep here, but as Harari sees a paleontologist interpreting this event, a random mutation, that's how evolution works, a random mutation occurred in the brains of the species Sapiens that had great survival value and was passed on genetically to successive generations. Harari identifies this as a new form of human communication. The emergence of fictive language, boy, this is sounding more and more jargon-filled, but simply put, Homo sapiens became able to talk about things in Harari's view that weren't really there, that were pure fiction. Other human species, in fact, some other animals, couldn't let others in their small, close-knit cohort know, be careful, there's a lion. Sapiens could share the new idea, the lion is the guardian spirit of our tribe. Ooh. Sapiens went on to construct whole imagined orders about the nature of the world, values we should all have, how society is to be correctly structured, all the myths, legends, gods, and religions that were eventually shared by thousands and then millions of others. This allowed Homo sapiens to cooperate flexibly but powerfully with other Homo sapiens as they advanced their drive to dominate the world. And dominate they did. By 30,000 years ago, all Neanderthals had been eliminated. Now, we sapiens are the one and only human species left on the planet. Practically all of the other animals are at our beck and call as well. Domesticated and even tortured in veal stands and cafos, or set behind bars and zoos or behind boundaries in safari parks. If small critters like viruses start to create problems, we'll sick the CDC on them and wear masks for a while. This all came about because we, Homo sapiens, learned how to talk fiction and pass on our imagined, non-real worldviews to passive and obedient successive generations. Successive generations of wise humans. Do you buy this view of how we humans have come to be top dogs in the world, believing in fictions that have no hard, objective reality? I would begin with questioning the scientists' assumptions that all humans of a given culture or civilization have all been effectively taught the world views and social values passed down to them by their elders and accept them fully without debate or doubt as their own. What young pupils don't get distracted or fall asleep for some of their basic lessons? What agile minds of any era don't question the logic and evidence for some of their traditions' conclusions? Think of your own experience as use, or if you're new to this, this is how we view ourselves, but what were you taught by your parents and teachers? Did you believe it? Exactly, completely, without doubt? Huh? You wouldn't be here, and those folks on Zoom wouldn't be here as Unitarian Universalists if we had. We are the folks who decisively broke away from the mold society tried to pour us into. And do we follow the scientist account that all our social values and worldviews are based on make-believe ideas with no basis in reality? Did our ancestors just make things up about God's values, sacred history that generations continue to believe because, well, we were told to? That's what this view claims about the major religious leaders of world history. They're just passing on what they have been taught by their respective traditions, and we followers just buy that. But consider what a recent New Testament scholar of Christianity says about Jesus. Marcus Borg notes that Jesus taught his followers not as one passing on his interpretation of the written or remembered Jewish tradition, but as somebody receiving direct and immediate inspiration from the Spirit of God. This experience of the Spirit was ongoing and authoritative for Jesus. His disciples and the others who heard him and his teachings felt similarly that they were being directly touched and transformed by the Spirit. This was a very definite reality in the world, not just a fictional lesson about what their elders and betters thought they should learn. Borg concludes that Jesus was not unique. He says there really are experiences of the sacred, of the numinous, of God. And Jesus was one for whom God was an experiential reality, as it was for such others as the Buddha, Lao Tzu, and Muhammad. An experiential reality, not a pure fiction. Borg goes on to say that the followers of Jesus do not just have an intellectual belief in Jesus as having certain proclaimed attributes, but are themselves in a relationship with the Spirit of God. Well, what might we Unitarian Universalists say to this? Are any of us in a direct relationship with the Spirit of Jesus, the Buddha, Lao Tzu, perhaps instead with the spirit of nature, of human love or scientific knowledge? We need a learned quote from one of our own religious luminaries, and Ralph Waldo Emerson provides a very good one that I keep coming back to. He was a renowned Unitarian and American literary figure living in our preferred seat of learning, Massachusetts, Concord to be exact. And in the mid-19th century wrote this digest of his own direct experience of the Spirit. Learn the revelation of all nature and thought, that the highest dwells within us, that the sources of nature are in our own minds. There is a deep power in which we exist and whose beatitude is accessible to us. Every moment when the individual feels invaded by it is memorable. Within us is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty, to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. When it breaks through our intellect, it is genius. When it breathes through our will, it is virtue. When it flows through our affections, it is love. Well, in the spirit of following the dictates of the Spirit and not just taking some venerable person's word for it, I have come to the conclusion that there are some things, a few great things, that we can settle upon right now as true, good, and wonderful. We are capable of having our own living, immediate experiences, testimonies of our senses, realities embedded in our minds, such as any day in which we see or remember a child doing what children do, hopping, skipping, bending down to look at an ant. Or when we watch a day unfold in sunshine or in rain, sweat-producing heat or bundling up cold. And yet again, as we regard the vastness of time and space, from looking up at the sky to watch clouds move against the endless blue, or to observing the uncountable and seemingly immutable stars in the night. And there is also the personal evidence of eternity, from knowing and recollecting aging life forms stretching to their fullness and then bumping against those new ones charging ahead. There is a moral clarity that develops with these journeys alongside sacred realities that we have come to acknowledge. I know without the slightest doubt that all children deserve our fullest care and support. I know with a conviction that has as its foundation the very starting point of the entire universe, that our planet's natural environment requires immediate protection and reverence. And it does not need proving to me at this moment in cosmic history, embedded and at one with this particular species, that all humans are fully imbued right now with worth and dignity. Let us live with such certainty guiding our way. I know we can live up to the name of humans who follow the Spirit. I know we are doing this already.